All right, let's talk about something huge, something that almost sounds impossible. How in the world do you build an ecosystem that's worth $10 billion? But it's not really just about the money. It's about building a community that's powerful, that's unified. So let's break down the actual blueprint for how it's done.
Okay, first, just try to picture this. A community of 100,000 people. And we're not talking about silent followers here. We're talking about active, engaged members who are all, more or less, moving in the same direction. I mean, just getting that many people together is a huge challenge on its own. But that's only half of the equation. Because this is the other half, a $10 billion ecosystem. So how do you get from a group of people to that kind of incredible value? Is it all just hype? Is it pure luck? Well, if you look at the thinking behind this, the answer is a hard no. The path is actually way more intentional than you'd think. And this slide, this really gets to the heart of it. Lasting value isn't built on what you see on the left, the hype, the constant noise, the emotional roller coaster that just burns out. No, it's built on the right side. Disciplined behavior, a clear structure, and the kind of deep stability that can last. So, here's the game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the big vision. Then we'll get into the core foundations you absolutely need. After that, we'll look at the power of habits when everyone does them together, how you scale your own impact, and finally, how all of this combines to create a real community engine. So let's start with that vision. The most important thing to get here is that the giant numbers, they're just an outcome. They're not the goal itself. A community doesn't grow just by adding more people. It grows because the people who are already there find real meaning. They find clarity in what they're doing, and they see a real path to make progress. And this right here, this is the core of that vision. It has nothing to do with temporary excitement. It's all about the daily habits of its members, the structure that holds everything up, and a shared respect for the space itself. That's what separates a real, lasting culture from just another fleeting crowd. So how do you actually build this kind of stability? Well, it all comes down to 5 core foundations. Let's dive into the first 2, because these are the essential building blocks that every single strong community has to have. The very first foundation is literacy. But listen, we're not just talking about reading books here. It's defined as the ability to see what's happening around you and not panic. It's about building a stable understanding so you can act with confidence instead of out of fear or confusion. Foundation number 2 is participation, and I love this quote. It's just so simple and true. A community's real strength comes from the people who actually take part. Asking questions, sharing what they've learned, helping somebody else out. Even the smallest act of just showing up makes the entire culture stronger. Okay, so our third foundation, this is where things really start to get interesting. It's the power of habit. This is where individual actions begin to stack up and create a collective strength. It's about creating stability not by forcing it, but by design, through shared routines. So what does that actually look like? Well, the source material lays out these 4 clear, repeatable actions. When you have a ton of people all doing these things over and over, accumulating, reviewing, observing, and learning, they create an environment that's predictable and stable for absolutely everyone. And here's the payoff, right? A community full of people practicing these habits becomes a community of quiet, thoughtful builders. And that is fundamentally different from a crowd of emotional reactors. That very difference, that's what makes a $10 billion ecosystem even possible. Okay, so we've got disciplined habits creating a stable community of builders. That's great. But how does that actually scale up? Well, it happens when all those individual actions start to transform into real, widespread, collective influence. And that brings us to the 4th foundation, influence. The way it's defined here is really important. It has nothing to do with how much money you have, your status, or some fancy title. Influence is just the natural result of being consistently clear. When you understand something deeply and act on that understanding, other people will naturally start to pay attention. Which leads us perfectly into the 5th and final foundation, openness. I mean, in the world we live in today, sharing your ideas creates ripple effects you can't even predict. As you see here, technology is knocking down barriers. Our expressions build networks, and those networks, they create massive opportunity. In an ecosystem like this, staying silent helps nobody. All right, so this is where it all comes together. This is the big payoff. What happens when you combine literacy, participation, habit, influence, and openness? Well, something pretty incredible. The community actually transforms into something else entirely. It stops being a passive place, just a chat room where people hang out. It becomes an active, productive engine. It becomes a system that generates its own power, its own momentum, constantly creating, improving, and pushing forward. It becomes a self-sustaining force. So, what does this engine actually do? It creates this incredible compounding effect. Every single person inside this system gets a little bit of an edge. They can move just a bit faster, they can see things a bit more clearly, they can build a bit more effectively. And these small individual advantages just stack up and up across the entire community. And that, right there, is the secret sauce. That compounding effect, that force multiplier, is what takes the goal of a $10 billion ecosystem from some crazy, impossible idea and turns it into a realistic, achievable target. It's just the logical result of a well-built community engine. At the end of the day, this isn't just a cool theory. It's a blueprint for actually doing something. We've walked through the 5 foundations: literacy, participation, habit, influence, and openness. So the real question isn't whether a $10 billion ecosystem is possible. The real question is, where are you going to start? Which foundation will you strengthen first?